This wasn't in the job description, it was the middle of summer in a heat wave. Got sent to a bungalow belonging to an elderly resident to install an extractor fan in the ensuite of his bedroom. The gentleman was going to be away on holiday during the install, and had left a key in an outdoor wall safe, so we could get in and do the work. Nice easy job. So I pull up to the house, knock on the door, even though I know he's not been in for 3 weeks at this point, force of habit, you never know. No answer, so I punch the code in and get the key out the wall safe. I put the key in the door and opened it, instant gag reflex, the smell was so bad I'll never forget it. It was like a vomit smell almost. Very unique though. I put on my respiration mask from my bag and pushed on. I opened the door to the bedroom, smells even worse. Jesus, what's this guy been doing in here? Kept gagging, but walked on. Then the worst part, I opened the door to the bathroom. Instantly vomiting in my mask, my legs turned to jelly, my stomach doing cartwheels. The gentleman was in the bath. Dead, he'd obviously been there a long time. 3 weeks, at least. I dropped my tools and ran outside. I took off my mask and wiped my face. Shaking and sweating horribly, I had to sit down. It took me a few minutes, but I rang the police. They didn't seem fazed, which surprised me, but I suppose they've heard it all. Lit a cigarette and rang my coworker, while waiting, and told him what had happened. He later told me he knew I wasn't joking, as my voice was so rattled. He arrived a couple of minutes later and was actually very comforting, which is a rare thing with the British building trade. It usually all banter and PSS taking. I don't blame him for not going inside. Few more minutes later, the police arrived. I was still in the same place I sat down when I come out the building. I could not get up, I was almost frozen in fear. One of the policemen was very sympathetic and helped me up. I gave a statement, and they gave me a lift home. Will haunt me for the rest of my life, but for those asking, I'm okay now. Haunted, but not by ghosts. I'm a locksmith, and there was a foreclosed funeral home that I was rekeying. It was straight out of a bad horror movie in its creepiness, no power at all and barely any light, not to mention the basement was a 100-year-old masonry with cadaver slabs and a cremation furnace. Creepy all in its own. However, when the real estate agent and I were sweeping the building, we went to the second floor, and there was a makeshift scarecrow with a shirt with a crude face smeared on it. There was also a bed sheet covered in blood, trash strewn about, a pile of cigarette butts, and a couple needles. Then we heard someone in the next room run across the floor. I called out, I'm just here to change the locks, and held a hammer. There was a pause. Then the sound of a breaking window and them climbing out. We immediately left and called the police. When they arrived and swept the building, they confirmed a squatter had indeed set up there but was now gone, so we went back and started changing locks. But after about 30 minutes, we heard the glass shuffle and 2 feet land on the floor. I called out again that we were still there and again they left. Called the police back and they had me change the locks with an officer on site. A week later, the building was set on fire. All work and no play. I work in restoration. People's homes flood. I unflood them. The cheap landlord of this low-income housing place hired some cheap demolition team who ripped the house apart, and it was found at midway through that the place contained a super high amount of asbestos. Place went abandoned for a few weeks, fully inactive job site. I got sent to assess the site to complete the job under proper procedure. The tenants left everything behind, and as a result, I learned a lot about these people. Couple of highlights here, a long note on the fridge clearly written for their young child detailing what fun is. It read, fun is chores, fun is doing your homework, fun is staying inside quietly. Fun is reading a book, fun is going to bed early. Fun is not going to friends' houses, fun is not playing with your toys, fun is not bringing friends over, fun is not watching TV. Fun is reading the Bible. In this little girl's room was Bible scripture written on the wall in crayon, and her room was sad. It was full of old clothes, they left all her toys behind, and the kitchen was covered in filth and mess. At any rate, all the biblical stuff and clearly oppressive rules on this little girl freaked me out. Never saw the tenants themselves, though. I'm kind of worried about that kid sometimes. Witness protection. I used to work as an installation technician for a popular satellite TV service. My most unforgettable story was a time I went to a house out in the country. I do my normal bit that I'm required to say and then get to work putting a dish on their roof. I come back in and tell them I need to go into the basement to run the lines for their new boxes, and this is where it gets fun. "Oh, you don't want to do that, buddy," says Mr. Customer. "Why not?" I ask politely. "It's really the only way I can route the cable where I need to. Because," says Mrs. Customer, "our septic tank backed up into the basement. This is going to smell." But I really had no other option. Here's the thing, their basement had a door to the outside that was frozen open. It was February and bitter cold. Their septic system backed up and filled the basement with about a foot of poo, which then froze solid. I go into the basement and spend a good 30 minutes running cable over my head, balancing very carefully, as I am now basically ice skating on a frozen poop lake. And now it gets scary. When I'm nearly done in the basement, I realize I can hear them yelling upstairs. Not like a parent scolding a child. I hear multiple voices shouting at the top of their lungs. "Keep your head down," I think to myself. "Finish the job and get out of here." As I get back upstairs, I am hit with a wave of noise. Every person in the house is yelling, and I see that two people are being held back from each other. I duck into a room and start connecting boxes so I can get out. Apparently, one of the daughters had a boyfriend there, and they had a disagreement. He said something nasty to her, and then she told her mother, who confronted him. More words must have been had, because then it turns into a physical and aggressive altercation. It's at this moment, as this 40-year-old woman and teenage boy are being restrained and screaming at each other, that the mother yells, "If the F-King cable guy wasn't here, I would kill you right the FCK now." All I can think at this point is that I need to get out of here. I don't want to watch a murder or have to deal with police. I practically ran out of that place, no signatures, no follow-up with the customer. I didn't get paid enough for that. Mannequin lady. I was a cable technician for a long time. There's too many weird things you see to pick just one, but one that comes to mind is mannequin lady. This woman lived alone. She stayed in the nook at the start of the hallway on her couch and had a TV box there. In both bedrooms, she had a single TV and a single chair. In each chair was a mannequin. In one bedroom was a woman mannequin, the other a man, and they were dressed up, sitting upright in the chairs, watching the TV. The TVs were always on. Repeat visits eventually got me to notice she changed the clothes of the mannequins, and sometimes, they would still be lying in the floor covered up with blankets like they were sleeping. Wearing pajamas. She treated them like actual people. She would talk to them, tell me to tell them things when I would go in the rooms to fix the TVs. It was a major mind CK the first few times. I would try and talk to her and make sure she was okay without straight up just asking. I never got the impression she wasn't stable enough to care for herself, and I had seen her out and about quite often. She drove herself, and even though she chain smoked, she didn't seem to have any major health issues. Such a strange day when you got to see her. On thin ice, EMT, but this is from a colleague of mine. He and his partner show up to the scene of a frequent flyer. The caller was an old lady who was lonely and often called just to talk. Well, this time when they show up and walk in, she's super distressed. They ask what's wrong, and she says her cat, Mr. Skittles, passed earlier that day. They say they're so sorry that happened. She says, "Look," walks over to the freezer, and pulls out Mr. Skittle, frozen into a block of ice. Funny thing is, my friend says they had just been there the other day, and the cat hadn't seemed sick then. Let the dogs out. I work as a mobile computer repair / IT service guy. I once went into a house to work on a laptop, and they just so happened to be my next door neighbors. The house had an animal smell. People with pets usually do not notice, but this was different. As I sat down to work on the laptop, I heard a loud screech, and a pygmy marmoset jumped from a cabinet onto my head, pulling my hair violently. I then watched as an albino skunk, 3 house cats, 2 small dogs, and various large birds, a myna, African gray, and what I think was some kind of guinea fowl, all appeared from various rooms and furnishings. All the animals were kind of friendly. There was no biting, but the sheer volume of animals in that tiny space was wild. A few weeks later, the Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Customs raided their house. I found out that my neighbor smuggled rare animals and had several aquariums full of rare poisonous snakes. Her children, chainsaw artist here. A portion of my job is going to houses my boss, who's a master carver, did previous carvings at. This one house had an immaculate exterior and interior, like painting the trim work every summer immaculate. It was so goddamn beautiful. Our job was to restain, recolor, and revarnish all her existing carvings, front and backyard, and call it good. She brought us iced tea, water, sandwiches, nice. She lets us use the bathroom. Here's where it gets weird. The entire inside of the house is dolls. All of it. Floor to ceiling of every room is dolls. Realistic child dolls facing corners. Sitting on tables. On chairs. Holding things. Dolls, dolls, dolls. As far as the eye could see. I walked a quarter of a mile down the street to a park and used the bathroom after that. I couldn't step foot in that house. At least he tipped. As a telephone technician, I once had to repair a shorted phone jack in a back bedroom, and the resident forgot that there were stacks of money and coke on the dresser right across from where I was working. He was right behind me, and he knew that I saw it, so I tried to play it off and get the hell out of there. Waiting outside of the room, he hands me $500 from one hand and, while brandishing a 9mm in the other, tells me, "You didn't see anything, right?" Still haven't seen anything. No exterminator could fix this. I worked in pest control. We got this call from this known sketchy area. So I get to this place, and there's like 4 families living there, and I don't know how many pets. But there's dog dada all over the house. On the carpets, on the furniture. The bathrooms apparently have no running water and are just filled with trash. The bathtubs and sinks filled with full trash bags. I'm like, "Good morning, what seems to be the problem?" In my most professional voice. They're like, "We have roaches." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll bet." I say, "Sure, show me the trouble areas." They say, "Well, they're mostly in the furniture." In the furniture. They take me to this old-style dining table. And they remove the extension leaf, and in the table grooves are just thousands upon thousands of roaches, climbing on each other, spilling out onto the carpet now and crawling everywhere. And I'll never forget this. Here I am, standing in the middle of a carpet littered with dog poop, roaches literally pouring out of furniture, and one of the guys looks at me kind of condescendingly and goes, "Careful where you spray that stuff, boy." I hear it's toxic. As I sprayed, roaches would come pouring out of everywhere. I'd spray in the kitchen cabinets, and they'd just pour out of the crevices, crawl up the walls, onto the ceiling, and then fall off onto the floor. As soon as I had to start dodging falling roaches from the sky, I said, "Welp, that'll about do it. Give it about 48 hours for the spray to spread to all the roaches." Which I completely made up. I raced out of that house and into the truck and felt like I had crawling things all over me for the next 2 days. Took about 17 showers. My boss called later that afternoon, chewing me out for not finishing the job. I told him if he wanted one more account so badly, he'd have to come do it himself. I could tell he didn't believe me, but was a little taken aback by my forcefulness, as I'm normally a pretty passive guy, so he complied. Sure enough, I get a call from him a few days later. He's like, "So I've been doing this for 40 years, and that was the worst house I've ever seen. I'm never stepping foot inside that place again." Oh, and their check had bounced.